It's not easy for anyone to make ends meet these days. Most of the people I know go out to work for one reason only: to make enough money to put food on the table and clothes on their back. I suppose you could say that they work to live. It wasn't like that with me. Oh, don't get me wrong, I was never rich. I had to work hard for every penny. But my work was my life, and I enjoyed every moment of it, and the privilege it's been.
Privilege? They used you, and you let them. They ate you up and spat you out, just like all the rest.
Don't say that to her. She put everything she had into her career, and it gave her a reason to live, a meaning to her life. It stopped her being afraid what the future held. What would she have left if you take that from her?
She'll have what she always had. Absolutely bloody nothing. She was used, and she took it all without trying to put up a fight. I'd like to say she's a pathetic individual, but she's not an individual, pathetic or otherwise. Life is full of people just like her. They trudge through their working lives like knackered old donkeys, carrying their back-breaking loads until they die of thirst and exhaustion by the roadside. And when they do, they're replaced, in the blink of an eye, by some other clone. So the cycle continues until someone has the balls to stand up and say no more.
I was never a confrontational person. I've never had to be. It wasn't my style, and let's face it, I really didn't need to be. They were already at a distinct disadvantage, writhing in pain and praying for their labour to be over. Most people I know tend not to be confrontational in those circumstances. Although I will admit, I've heard a few choice words that wouldn't be out of place in the shipyard when the pain became unbearable. But I felt it was my job to support and comfort my ladies in the most harrowing time of their life, because it is horrendous, but it's also the most miraculous event they'll ever experience. Never mind a tale of two sitters. Charles Dickens must have witnessed the birth of a baby to be inspired to write the lines, "It was the best of times, it was the worst of times." If that doesn't describe labour, I don't know what does.
You shared their joy and shed tears for them when their babies are born, and bonds are forged in those ladies that will last forever. They thought you were wonderful.
Ha! You mean until she left her houses? How many of them would have remembered her name a month later? Not 1 in 100. Well, maybe 1 or 2 would have remembered her. But those were the women where things went wrong. Like the baby whose shoulder got stuck. You know, she did everything she could humanly do to get that baby out. And they both died. The mother and child. They blamed her. That's how much they appreciated how hard she tried.
Don't take her back there. It's too traumatic. She's tried to block it out, but the flashbacks return again and again. And she's tormented when she thinks, was there anything I could have done to save them? When I realised what was happening, did I freeze momentarily, afraid to make the wrong decision? Did that moment's hesitation deprive a man of his wife and 3 children of their mother?
When I left the house, her man was sitting by the fire smoking his pipe. They were such a poor family. It's surprising that he could afford the tobacco. There was never enough wood in the house to keep it warm, just a few embers burning in the grate. And he just stared at them. I wondered then, did he see his wife and child in the flames? But if he did, he didn't show it. He showed no emotion, not even to his 3 ragged children who were sobbing uncontrollably as they huddled together for warmth in the corner. I failed to save the life of a mother and child that day. But I ruined the life of 4 others, and I've never forgotten it. There was nothing I could do. I didn't know what happened to them after I left the house.
You couldn't go back to what you'd done. How could you bear to face the consequence of your actions? To look once more into the eyes of a man who had lost everything because you couldn't save them. A man for whom there was no way forward, for his children or himself.
But there were so many wonderful experiences, and you were a part of those. After all the pain and suffering of labour, it was you who handed the babies to their mothers and witnessed the peaceful calm that descended when a mother and a child united in the first seconds of life. Those moments are so precious to everyone, and you were a part of those. They'll stay with you forever.
I remember Mrs. Collins. She'd been trying for a baby for 20 years, and it was a source of great sadness to both her and her husband that she failed to conceive. But as the years passed, they began to accept that they wouldn't have children, and they tried to fill their life in other ways. They'd be the first to confess that the company they had with their dogs could not compare to having children of their own. Oh, they enjoyed taking their dogs out for walks, and they made the most of the life that fate had dealt them. But one day, out of the blue, Mrs. Collins came to visit me. She looked flushed, and I wondered if Mr. Collins had been taken ill. So I invited her in, and she was barely through the door before she blurted out, "I'm going to have a baby." Oh, well, I was wary at first. I didn't want to raise her hopes. I mean, I knew that at her age, the signs she was interpreting as pregnancy could just as easily be the start of the menopause. But she was right. She had her first child at 46, and Mr. Collins was 54. I have never seen prouder or happier parents.
It was an amazing moment. There wasn't a dry eye in the room. They wheeled their baby around, and I swear, they were walking on air. It was a truly special moment.
Ridiculous. Why would anyone want to have a baby when most other people were becoming grandparents? I wouldn't call that special.
They were all special to me. Many of them were born into families that couldn't afford to feed the mouths they already had. But from the second they came into the world, they were loved. And for a few moments, immediately after the delivery, the worry of where the next meal was coming from evaporated into thin air. That moment was for celebration.
It seemed amazing. No matter how many children a family already had, each new baby brought its own love with it.
Oh no, they didn't. Not all of them anyway. What are the fathers who came rolling in drunk after their babies had just been born, having spent next week's rent money on drinks in the pub for equally useless fathers? All that money just to wet the babies' heads. You've seen the look of despair in the eyes of those wives because they knew they'd not only have to make ends meet without any money, but they'd have to take a beating when the effects of the alcohol began to wear off. Where was the love in those families? You're just blind to the realities of the world you pretend not to see.
I wasn't blind. I saw the cruelty that existed alongside the love. And generally, I was happy to leave a child in the care of their family. But there were times when I had to steel myself to pack my bag and walk away, knowing that the future looked bleak for the child that had just been born.
It was beyond bleak. That little boy was born to the Jeffersons. He was their 13th child, and certainly wasn't wanted by his good-for-nothing father. The baby lived for 3 weeks after you left. They said he died of pneumonia, but it was a lie, and everyone knew it, including you. That bastard had smothered him because his crying had woken him from an alcoholic haze. Well, he cried because he was starving. You know, she probably knew what was going to happen to him, and she just walked away. She picked up her bag and walked out the door, and she never looked back. 3 of his older kids had already died under suspicious circumstances, but nobody cared. The police weren't interested, and nobody was interested in slum families. What if 3 out of a whole gaggle of kids had died? Everyone had enough problems of their own with getting involved in other people's.
Yes, she knew. She wasn't blind, but she had a job to do and she did it. But that doesn't mean she didn't fear for that poor baby. Didn't you know when she didn't look at him while she cleaned them up? She couldn't bear to look at the light with those innocent eyes, knowing chances were to be snuffed out after a short, horrific existence. When she left, she managed to walk out normally. But as soon as she got out that door, she ran around that corner and leant against the wall while she threw up, with tears streaming over her face and snot running from her nose. Yes, she knew what she meant to him. They weren't her kids. She just delivered them.
I felt as if they were mine. I delivered hundreds of them and they were all unique. But I was there before they were born. I helped their mother with the delivery. I cared for their babies in the first precious moments of their life. And I thought of them as mine.
But they weren't yours, were they? You just leached off of other people's lives, imagining in some way you had some ownership because you were there when their children were born. You're pathetic. You're a sad, lonely woman who has no one. You've no children of your own.
But she did have. You know she had a daughter, a precious baby, and she adored her. She was the best thing that ever happened in her life.
Yes, she had a daughter. But for how long? For 1 day. 24 hours. Tell me, what kind of mother can you be in 1 day? You know, if she hadn't been such a slut, having a bastard child at 15, she would have been healthier, instead of being worked to death in that home for unmarried girls. Then, possibly, she could have kept the child, and it would have survived, and she would have been a real mother.
I was just a girl when my darling daughter was born. I'd been working in service. It was hard work, but I was happy there. I just started walking out with one of the stable lads when I became pregnant. They dismissed me from my job as soon as they found out. And I had to go and live in a home for unmarried girls. That's where my baby was born. I was desperately unhappy, and my health was suffering. I went into labour just 7 months into my pregnancy, and my baby girl was born 2 months early. She was a tiny, beautiful little thing. I've never seen anything so perfect. Her hand was no bigger than my thumbnail, but she gripped my finger tightly. Some of the women who ran the home were kind, but a couple of them were horrible. They treated us like slaves, and they said we had to pay for being evil. Well, the night my baby was born, the most vicious one was in charge. And when she saw how tiny and premature my baby was, she waved her hand dismissively towards the cardboard box they used as a crib. And she said, "Put it in there and leave it there. It'll be dead by morning." Well, she was a most overbearing and frightening woman. And normally I would have carried out her every instruction without question. But there was no way I was going to be parted from my baby. So I just screamed at her to get out and leave us alone. Thankfully, on that one occasion, she didn't cause trouble or argue. She just left the room. And she never came back to check up on me or my baby. I held her close all night. I tried to get her to suckle at my breast, but she was so premature she couldn't suck. So I talked to her for hours. I told her about me, and about her father, and about our life in service. I told her of the hopes and dreams I had for her, and how proud I was of her, and what a beautiful baby she was. And we stayed like that, close and loving, till the following day, when she slipped away gently in my arms.
You knew she was going, and you held her tight, putting some of your life and strength to pass into her body. You knew she was slipping away, and you were screaming inside, "Please live, please stay with me." Your heart was breaking, and it could never be mended.
I carried on nursing her till 4 o'clock. And there was one small window in the room. The sun was shining, and the rays were falling down on my baby. She looked warm and cozy in the light of the sun's rays. She could have been sleeping. Well, one of the other ladies who ran the home, one of the kinder ladies, came to check up on us to see how we were doing. Mrs. Thompson. I can see her face now. She must have known immediately that my baby was dead. But she just stroked her face and told me what a beautiful baby girl she was. She told me I'd learned to live with the grief of losing her, but that I'd never forget her, or the few precious moments we had together. And then she said, "May I take her now?" But I clung on to her even tighter. I knew if I let go of her then, I'd never see my baby again. But she slipped her hand gently under my baby, carried her out of the room. I didn't cry. I didn't move. My whole body was numb. But I knew then that I'd never, ever recover from losing her.
You shared a lifetime of love in those few short hours. You experienced the joys of motherhood, that unconditional, overwhelming love that knows no bounds. Some women don't even know what that's like, but you do. And no one can ever take that from you.
But it was never enough. Mrs. Thompson was wrong. You never learned to live with the grief of losing her. Instead, you had to live with the fear of what that loss could drive you to.
But you never learned to live with the loss, did you? You just let it take control. You can't just give in to things. You have to fight. Where was your backbone? Your determination? Did you really think you would get away with it? Did you think they wouldn't come looking for you?
I didn't think at all. It was as if a mist had descended around me. And when it suddenly cleared, I knew exactly what I had to do. The mother was already ill. She'd had TB. They didn't expect her to live, even if she hadn't become pregnant again. But the pregnancy took a lot out of her. It was a breech birth with other complications. The baby girl was born 10 minutes past 8. I placed her gently in her mother's arms. She was so weak, but she managed to hold her for a second. And I watched her as she smiled down and she closed her eyes and took her last breath. There was nothing I could do to help them.
Why? Why didn't you stop to think?
Because she was going to put the baby into an old wooden box that was being used as a crib and it started to snuggle into her breast. She stood there, holding the baby, and the old memories of that closeness flooded over her, and her breast ached. In that moment, she felt as though her child had been returned to her, and there could be no thought of losing her again. It was as though as if fate had a hand in giving her back a child.
The father hadn't come back from work, and the other children were waiting downstairs. And I knew there was no way that he could care for and feed a baby. He had to go to work to feed the family he already had.
Oh, who are you trying to fool? You never gave him a thought. You decided you were going to take the child from the house, and the only person you thought about was yourself.
She couldn't help it. Her whole body was shaking. She knew what she was going to do, but her heart was pounding, and her knees were so weak she could barely stand.
I wrapped the baby firmly in a blanket and went downstairs. I was clinging tightly to it, praying she wouldn't make a sound. When the oldest girl, who was almost 17, approached, I kept the baby's head covered, and I told her that her mother and the baby had both died. She started to cry. I told her the baby had been stillborn, but that I'd take it with me so they didn't need to dispose of the body. And she was so distraught, she accepted without question. I left the house as quickly as I could. When I got outside, the reality of what I'd done hit me.
You should have taken the child back into the house. You could have made up a story that it had suddenly taken a breath and was alive. They wouldn't have known any different.
She couldn't do that. She could barely walk. She was shaking so much, her mind was whirring around.
I could have taken it back. It wasn't too late. But in my mind, it was now mine. I wasn't going to let them take a second child away from me. I left that house with the child, and when I left, my heart was singing.
You deserved a second chance. All those babies you had delivered for other people, and the beloved daughter you had lost. Now this one was for you. You felt the grief that you carried around for the past 3 decades, lit from your shoulders, and you were alive again.
She was a child snatcher, that's what she was!
I had her with me for 3 weeks. 3 weeks. I looked after her. I fed her, clothed her, washed her, dressed her, cared for her when she cried. But those 3 weeks I loved her and she was mine.
It was perfect. It was everything you'd hoped for and more.
How long did you think you could get away with it?
I didn't think that they'd come looking for her. I was so sublimely happy I didn't think at all. Then, the most catastrophic thing happened. It was Tuesday morning. The sun was just beginning to break through the crack in the curtains.
It was wonderful. It couldn't have been any better. For the first time, you understood what heaven on earth really meant.
I got up and put my dressing gown on. I walked quietly over to the cot. I didn't want to disturb her in her sleep. And besides, I loved watching her sleep. She was so beautiful. But as I got closer to the cot, my stomach tightened and I felt faint and I knew there was something wrong.
Oh my God. She's not breathing. Wake up, please wake up!
I touched her and she was cold and lifeless.
No, no, no!
I ran downstairs, out into the street, screaming for somebody to help me. But I knew instinctively that nothing could be done. And the neighbours rushed out of their houses, and a doctor was called along with the police. The police arrived first. There was a knock on the door. I didn't think about the fact that I'd abducted her when I answered the door. In my mind, she was mine. I had nothing to be afraid of with the police. But when I opened the door, and I saw the two policemen standing there, I knew they'd find out.
Started to scream, "Don't take her, please! She's mine! You can't take her!"
One of the policemen walked straight over to the cot and lifted the baby out and said, "Yes, the baby's dead," and carried her out. And the other police officer was holding me back as I was fighting to get to my baby. I collapsed at his feet as the door closed behind her and she was gone.
You idiot. What did you think would happen? A baby had died. Didn't you think they would actually check to make sure it was your child?
I didn't think at all that day. Some scars run so deep that reason and logic just evaporated into thin air. I didn't take it to hurt anyone. I didn't think of the outcome. But at that moment, the yearning that I had buried deep inside of me for years surfaced. And I longed to love a baby again with the all-encompassing love that only a mother can experience.
And this is the result.
They didn't believe me when I told them that I hadn't done anything wrong. I told them she was happy and healthy when I put her in her cot and said goodnight, kissed her. Oh, they kept saying, "You smothered her." One of the policemen kept saying, "You put a pillow over her face and smothered her, didn't you?"
Never! How could I hurt her? She was like my own child and I loved her.
The jury didn't believe you either, did they?
No. No one believed me. But they were wrong. I loved her. I couldn't have done anything to harm her.
Are you afraid of death?
I watched my own daughter die in my arms. And her passing was peaceful and calm. So why should I be afraid of death? God won't judge me. Oh, yes, I took her and I shouldn't have. I know that now. But I never, ever did anything to harm her.
It's time, Marion. Are you ready?
Tell him you're not fucking ready. Tell him to go and hang himself. Ask him if he'd be ready to face the gallows.
Tell him to leave you alone. You never attempted to hurt anybody when you took her. Please go away.
Enough! Enough! No more. It's time. I am ready.
You know, you can have one last wish, Marion. Is there anyone you want to see?
Yes. My daughter. But she's waiting for me in the next life. Please, lead the way.